As you've probably heard, Pope Francis is out of the hospital. Still, Seth Doane tells us, after more than a month of treatment and at the age of 88, questions abound about what comes next for the pontiff and the Catholic Church.
The faithful have been praying for their pope as he'd asked, and today got what they hope is a sign of progress.
Grazie a tutti e vedo questa signora.
Francis greeting supporters before being discharged. Throughout his 5-week hospitalization, vigils were being kept at the Vatican
Amen.
And churches worldwide. Among them, St. Patrick's Catholic American Parish in Rome.
He's been a great pope, and I believe he is not ready to go yet.
Every organization, every bureaucracy, in a way, hates change and loves to prepare for it.
Historian and papal biographer Austin Ivory told us with the Pope in the hospital, the Vatican was a tense place.
So the fact that in the Vatican they're thinking about a future without Pope Francis, to me, is perfectly right and perfectly normal.
Io, con la mia bronchiti, non posso ancora.
We'd seen the Pope struggle to finish speeches.
Yes, good enough.
Before he was hospitalized February 14th with acute respiratory failure, which developed into pneumonia in both lungs. While historically this pope has been public with his infirmities, the first photo of him was not released until more than a month into his hospitalization.
There must be a source of enormous frustration to him that he can't be the Pope that we know him to be, you know, the one who goes out to meet people, to hug them, to go around the world on these extraordinary, epic trips. And on the other hand, he accepts it.
Francis's doctor said Saturday that there were 2 critical episodes when the Pope's life was in danger. He's now well enough to be discharged, but he'll need to rest for 2 months, continue respiratory rehab, and avoid large groups.
We have an understanding, really, that comes from the last few decades of the Pope as somebody who just is surrounded by crowds and is constantly out. Of course, that's a very kind of new idea. For much of history, the Pope has been a rather reclusive figure.
In its updates, the Vatican would often mention that the Pope was working, underlining Francis remained in charge.
Can people openly within the church discuss what's next, or is that taboo?
Well, I think it's probably easy enough to talk in general terms.
At the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome, we met Father Mark Lewis while the Pope was in critical condition.
If you look at a lot of what even the Vatican is saying, it's what will the next conclave look like? What are the rules? You always dust off what the procedures are going to be. And this is probably a good time to do it.
How much politicking, wheeling and dealing is there behind the scenes at this point?
As a historian, I could say that most of the politicking, the campaigning is very, very subtle. You're not going to see campaign banners.
Right now, there are 252 cardinals, but only those under 80 years old. Currently, 137 of them would be eligible to cast ballots in the conclave, where a new pope is selected.
Cardinale De Iemi, 34 voti.
It's a process dramatized in the Academy Award-winning film.
You know, we've still seen the film Conclave, you know, we know what the Sistine Chapel looks like, the cardinals voting and so on. But the real action takes place before they go into the Sistine Chapel. There's a 11-day meeting of the world's cardinals. And in that meeting, they're saying, what pope do we need for this church at this time and the world at this time? And they don't talk about names, they talk about a profile.
The profile of this pope is one who's led the church in a more inclusive direction, encouraging the world's Catholics to consider those on society's margins.
The papacy is a role for life, but now that people are able to live so much longer because of modern medicine, at what point does that change?
Yeah, I think nowadays, because of modern medicine, so many of the long-term conditions that people used to die of, actually now they can remain living for a long time, and that's where I think resignation then becomes much more of an issue.
But resigning, as his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, did, was an extraordinary exception in church history. Benedict was the first pontiff in nearly 600 years to do so. And on this Sunday morning, the focus is on a pope recovering and returning home.
Are popes as powerful as they used to be? Do they mean as much as they used to?
The Pope has no sort of power in the worldly sense. He controls no army. The kind of trade that the Vatican does with other countries is not something, they can be used to negotiate. So he doesn't have that kind of worldly power. What he has is an immense moral power. I think in this world now that we're entering into, maybe a world of strong men in which the rule of law doesn't apply in the same way, the prophetic voice of the Church, I think we'll find, is going to be more needed than ever before.